Hello, and a very warm welcome from me and from my excited self. I'm looking forward to this talk since, I don't know, days and weeks with Maggie Stiefvater. Her novel, The Listeners, has been translated into German by Sabine Hübner, and the Grand Hotel Avalon just came out today. It's publishing day in Germany at Fischer Verlag. And this is a very good reason to celebrate. And I love celebrate literature, and I cannot imagine a better way to do it after reading than to talk about it. And I'm really looking forward, Maggie Stiefvater, to join us. Until she comes, maybe. I see her already. This is a very good sign. Maybe she wants to place a joining request. And then we start. There she is. It's working so good. I knew it. Hello, and a very warm welcome to you, Maggie Stiefvater. It's so nice that you're here to join us. This is the German, to say the truth, this is the German copy of your book, but I did the mirror thing on Instagram. And this is the German version of The Listeners, translated by Sabine Hübner, which is out just today, published at Fischer Verlag. So congratulations.
Danke.
Oh, wow. And thanks for joining this talk. So we have a little conversation about your writing and about the great story you gave to us. Maybe I start introducing you. Maybe some people, are you okay? Everything nice over there?
I like how you did that backwards. Yes, everything is fine. There are a lot of dogs in the house with me right now. So if suddenly you hear 7 dogs begin to bark, or I'm carried away by dogs, that's what's going on.
Yeah, but you live the dream. I know that a lot of people I know dream of a life that you have. So you live in I think you live in the woods. Do you live in the woods?
I do live in the woods. My parents also live in the mountains, so I split my time in the middle of nowhere with lots of dogs. It is true that I do work alone, surrounded by books and dogs. And when I say it that way, it does seem like it is pretty idyllic.
It is really, it sounds like we all should ask you afterwards how you did it to get there, how you managed it to get there. So, and we had a talk last week, you and I mixed up the time zones, and now it's, I'm in Berlin, it's tonight already, it's 8 o'clock in the evening, and you are in West Virginia, and it's early afternoon, right?
It's 2 p.m. here, which means it's almost snack time. I'm thinking about my next cup of tea. Bedtime is very far away.
Yeah, so maybe we go on with the conversation, so you have it soon. And so Maggie Stiefvater wrote a lot of books, mostly for a younger audience. And maybe you know The Raven Cycle or The Scorpio Races, and many more books and series for young adults. She teaches writing, and she's a musician. Is it right? You are a musician?
Yes, I play the bagpipes. I think it's the Dudelsack, right?
Yes, your German is so good. We have to talk about Dudelsack when we talk about the starting of your novel, because some things make sense to me now. And thank you for all the comments below. Whenever you have a question or wanted to add something, just feel free to do it. And you paint stunning, beautiful drawings. This is also, I fell in love with every Dachshund drawing you showed on Instagram, and I thought, oh, I think I need them all. It's really worth having a look. And your novel, The Listeners, came out in June this year. I think it was the 3rd, and now it's translated into German by Sabine Hübner and published at Grand Hotel Avalon not at, but as Grand Hotel Avalon at Fischer Publishing House. So this is why we are here today. So maybe we're starting with the bagpipes, because this makes sense now, because the novel you wrote is takes place in 1942, and I think it's Burns Day, right?
Yes, Burns Day, the celebration of the Scottish poet's birthday, Robert Burns. It's a very old-fashioned holiday, I think, but I think I spent more time at Burns Night than most Americans did in their youth, because I was a bagpiper. I still play the bagpipes, but you can see I have a license plate from my college bar.
Okay.
Right?
I see.
It was a very popular thing that if you were hired to play the bagpipes, you were brought in to play for these Burns nights. So I would arrive, and it would be all of these extremely elderly folks, and I would play the pipes for them.
Yeah, just.
When I was thinking about what kind of huge party a hotel like this would throw during the off season in January, I thought, well, I know something.
You are the only one who knows.
January.
You and maybe a few other people, or the Scots, of course. And this is where it starts. It starts at Burns Day in a luxury hotel. You already said it. And it's June Porter Hudson who runs that hotel as a manager. And it's, we just said it, it's 1942. So Pearl Harbor, 7 weeks ago. And the luxury hotel is going to be changed from the ground, because the president just sent an instruction that every guest have to leave, and instead of them, 300 ex-diplomats have to be accommodated at the Grand Avalon Hotel and Spa. So this is changing everything for the hotel and for the world, and for June, of course. What was your first idea of writing about a luxury hotel in that special time?
Oh my goodness. I did not actually originally think I would be writing a historical novel, and I certainly did not think I would be writing a World War II novel. But I did think that I wanted to write a hotel novel. Years and years ago, I stayed in a hotel in London, and I had been in so many hotels at this point. And
because you were reading so much all over the...
Yes. And they all looked identical, but this hotel in London, in Kensington, it was so specific. And when I was there, everyone who was staying in this tiny hotel with me was also someone who had a very capital letter profession. So I was a capital A author, but there was also a capital P physician, and also a capital E explorer, which feels like a very indulgent profession to have in the modern era. And every time we ran into each other, we had these very big capital letter conversations. And so that moment happened years ago, but that's when I thought, oh, I think I like the idea of one day writing a book in a hotel, because it can be such a big metaphor for the rest of the world. And so I was looking for specific hotels. I wanted that feeling of I feel like my novels have a sense of, they take place somewhere that you wish that you could go, but you can't actually go. And I feel like what's a perfect
I want to check in immediately.
Is that if you play something in history, it automatically has that feeling to it of wistfulness. So I was looking at historical hotels, and I can't remember what survey I was reading, and it was just a single line I remember talking about how half a dozen hotels in the Appalachian area had been tapped by the State Department to host access diplomats. And I thought, those are my mountains. How did I not know this huge moment? And they're not metropolitan areas. They're very much in the middle of nowhere.
They're in the middle of nowhere.
The idea of them hosting global citizens and being part of the war in this way just felt outrageous to me. So that was actually the start. And the hardest part for me was, I am not a creature of luxury. So learning to kind of languish in that atmosphere of luxury was a learning experience for me.
It's like a special world in the world. It's like a second, I don't know, like a universe, side universe, something like this. But I'm so happy that you said that also you didn't know it, because when I finished your novel and I was reading, and I was really, really clinged into it, and I was always thinking, oh, what a great idea she invented. And in the end of the book, you write how you came to that idea, and this is based on true stories. And I haven't ever thought about this, of course. So what is we have the situation that the Americans, they joined the war very, very freshly. So it's very, very new to them. And it's very far away. The war was really far away for them. So it's not a feeling like, what do you think? How did they feel at that time?
Well, it was really interesting to come at the war from this direction because I feel like you and I talked about this a little bit when we spoke last week. I feel like Americans have a very set legend of what our role was in World War II, and we were just the good guys. We got to come in and we were the cowboys and we did everything right, and we had the high ground throughout. And it was very interesting to sort of sneak in the back door and come in through these hotels and see that the same prejudices that were operating all over the world were actually operating in the US as well. And by bringing that story and talking about what we were doing on the home front, it makes it, I think, a little bit easier than if you're out on a battlefield where it just is obvious right and wrong. Here, the differences are more subtle, and the differences between class and the idea of racism looks different. And so that was extremely appealing to me. But also, it was wild to spend so much time doing the primary source research on this. I was a history major. And to read about
right? Did it help?
Just how enthusiastic and completely clueless the Americans were. They really thought the war was going to be over very quickly. They really thought that it was something very exciting. And the very first moment when the Pearl Harbor news was announced on the radio, it was so outrageous that the Americans could possibly be attacked in such a way that everyone thought there had just been a War of the Worlds radio show, and everyone thought it was a new dramatic radio program at first instead of reality. It was just wild.
Oh wow! And before we come to the diplomats again, and what the role of how it changed everything, we have to look how it was before they came. You said you had to learn the language of luxury hotels. How did you do it?
I read many memoirs from hoteliers at the time. And through interlibrary loan, I got every single issue of the Hotel Monthly, which was the industry magazine. And I read all of them cover to cover. And I also patched up my knowledge by getting some interviews with actual real life luxury hoteliers. And not just people who ran nice hotels, but one of these hoteliers during his career had run a property in Switzerland that went for $54,000 a night. So it was...
It's heavyweight.
Indeed. But what was amazing about this is that was the kind of hotels that were chosen by the State Department for this. These weren't just nice hotels. They tapped on the Greenbrier and the Homestead, and these are places where presidents came to stay. So I knew that I had to become not just fluent in the language of nice hotel, I had to understand why, if someone has everything and is very wealthy, why are they picking everything up to go and stay somewhere else? What's the difference between wealth and luxury? And the book does talk about that. And I truly believed at the beginning of this novel that I would be debunking luxury and saying, one more thing that needs to go by the wayside. And I have to say that after going through all of it, that was the one thing that I thought, I think this actually is a worthwhile principle to have. This idea of knowing someone just at that essential level that you can anticipate them.
And it's so easy. I can connect to that so good, because I thought our luxury hotel novel, maybe I find so many things I find disgusting and I don't like them and whatever. But what you point so really good out in that story is that the real luxury is very far away from just wealth or something. Of course, you have to afford it and you have to pay for that hotel, and it's just a special, very small group of people who can do this in their lives, and sometimes maybe more than one night. And the real luxury is to be recognized, to be known. So this is what June, the manager, we talked about her, she's the main character for me, and she's one of the, I don't know, the characters in books that you absolutely go with from page one, and no matter what she's doing, you're so close to her and you like her so much. So this is how it was with me. And she has a kind of a superpower to keep an eye on everything. Or what's her, how does she run the hotel to make it look so easy, so effortless to provide that kind of lifestyle?
June Hudson is one of my favorite characters to write ever. I think we really love watching someone being competent, someone who really knows them, but also we really like the idea of being known. So this combination that June Hudson's superpower of competence is that she can see past that surface to the interior, I think is very appealing. But I really leaned upon another hotelier that I spoke to, who when I was telling him about this, he said, oh, she's going to have to earn them, her staff. That's going to be the most difficult part of it, is that you can't run a luxury hotel because you run a tight ship. It's not about that. A luxury hotel is a game that everybody agrees to play. It's the power of the collective, that there's no excuse to make something so magnificent unless your guest also understands the value of what you are providing. Yeah. And so you create someone who is able to see her staff as a family and to make them love the game along with her. To me, that felt like that was one of the more heartbreaking things that I read about when I was reading about these real hotels, is that the managers had to convince their staff that as they were sending off their sons and their husbands to war, that they had to provide this sort of level of luxury to the enemy, and they had to do it with a smile on their face, not just as service, but as really genuinely wanting them to have a good time, which seems like such a tall order to ask people.
And June this is so special about her. She has it's kind of a commandment on a ship. She has really everything inside. She knows everything. And I sometimes ask myself if I think she does. I think she's working the hardest. So she made her way from the very bottom of the hotel. She worked in the operating the elevators, she worked in the post office, and now she's the manager. She's the most mightiest person in daily business. She is, and she's so kind. It's such it's such a special thing. Is it something you think is very worth describing, how people can be kind to each other even in such mighty positions?
I love this question. I really wanted to look at the power of the collective, because I'm very interested in this idea of when is it a good or a bad thing to have these big, grandiose ideas that couldn't be done unless you have a lot of people, because it's impossible to not compare. These hotels had 300, 400 staff members. And to compare that sort of scale and the power that is consolidated in June Hudson with what's also happening with the war, when a whole lot of people are also being motivated under governing principles, where they're going and saying, we're fighting for America, we're fighting for Germany. You pick your side because you believe in the power of the one. So looking at, do I think that that's ever a positive thing? And how do I think that you actually get that power? And I do think that you can tell them. But when I was looking at my own life experience, where I've done many a grandiose plan, I, right after COVID, I think I might have told you, I locked hundreds of writers into a Scottish castle. And
Scotland again.
It's true. And we made them throw out all of their books and really just recreate their entire creative personalities from scratch and make friends and just trust me. To be in that place where you can go and say, what I've been doing before hasn't been working. Can I recreate a new version of myself? And that requires not a draconian person standing there telling you have to get up at this time, you have to do this, but instead just sort of this super powered, non-judgmental empathy, which looks at that bigger picture and doesn't try to micromanage, that you trust the people to go on their way. So I wanted to bring that to June, as well as, like I said, these other hoteliers, when you're reading their memoirs, they're just, I remember talking to one of them and he broke off speaking and he said, you do realize you and I do the same thing. We're both magicians. It's all about knowing what other people are thinking and trying to control their emotional experience, curate their emotional experience. And staff is just another level of that guest, because if the game stops being fun, then it's just a job.
And it has to be balanced. And it's also something I've learned from your novel, that the people who provide the service or provide the luxury, the staff, the workers, sometimes they're the more interesting and the more funny ones. So it's not, the luxury guests are the ones I'm interested in, but it's not kind of the opposite, but it's also the stories, the stuff, they have kind of a power also.
One of my favorite stories that I read was that at the Greenbrier, that when folks would come into the dining room and they were part of this detention, it would be any of the federal agents, they would be stopped at the door by the staff that would say, we'll loan you the right coat and tie for this. You can't come in like that, because they didn't know the rules. When they would sit and they would say, sir, that's the right fork, because they want them to play the game right. They don't want other people to look at them.
Otherwise,
and think,
it's not working.
Yeah. So I do find it so interesting that everyone wants to make the game work smoothly.
Yeah, and you feel that, and you read the pages, and you start to think about where is your game and where can you change and make your game maybe in your place a little better. It's very, very interesting what it does to us. So you just mentioned the agents, so we have to talk about the FBI, and that brings us to Tucker Minnick. Who is Tucker, and what role does he play in the book?
So Tucker is one of the FBI agents who is assigned to the hotel. He is theoretically supposed to be there to gather information, because the diplomats who came to these hotels are intensely global citizens. They have, before the war, they rubbed elbows with each other all the time, and they were very good friends. They existed in a class all of their own. They exchanged all kinds of information, and it was well known at the time that it was almost synonymous to be a diplomat and a spy. To be a cultural attaché meant that you were also there, going and maybe taking a look at the shipyards while you're around and sending a letter back. And so theoretically, he is supposed to be gathering intel, and this was part of reality as well. But practically, they didn't think that they would find any information there that was going to be dangerous. The real reason why they wanted to have a strong agent presence was because they felt that the diplomats were in real danger from the surrounding environs, from the Americans, that once they found out that they were being kept in this hotel, which they couldn't be imprisoned. Diplomats can't be imprisoned, so they had to be kept in some kind of pleasant
of a luxury internment or something. Yeah.
And so he was there he's exiled because he has a secret past which has led him to this place. So even though he's given his entire life to the FBI, he finds himself here with this kind of paper pushing job that he is somewhat resentful of. And of course, he has his own history with the area that is making him quite surly and unpleasant.
Yeah, and this the readers have to discover themselves, of course. But what's important is the intern diplomats who are at the hotel at that moment when the story begins, or they come at that moment. They should stay how long, and what should happen with them afterwards?
Right. So when the State Department first came, they said, well, they were voluntold, right? They were volunteer, but also told. They said, would you like this assignment? But they really meant, you're going to take this assignment. And at first they told them it was just going to be a few weeks, and then it became a few months, and then it was 8 months for several of the hotels. And then over the course of all of the actual internments, it was more than a year. And after that, they would be exchanged with American diplomats who were being held in similar conditions, theoretically similar conditions, in Japan and Germany. And so they looked forward to this moment of almost being ready to go for a very long time. And when I was writing this novel, I thought, I want to make sure that this doesn't feel like a COVID novel, because the idea predated COVID, was kicking around through it. And I thought it could be very easy for the metaphor of this to be about lockdown. And I didn't want to feel like lockdown.
You mix together with people you maybe better want to leave, but you are not allowed to, and some things.
Exactly. And so I felt that more than ever, my focus shifted onto the staff and what it took to take care of the diplomats. The experience of the diplomats is important as well, but that's not really what emotionally carries the book, I don't think.
And it's not, again, it's not that black and white, because a lot of that diplomats brings their families with them, and a lot of diplomats have never been back at home, they are on posts everywhere in the world, and you don't know how Nazi they are to speak so easily. So it's a very great moral, I don't know what it is. It's kind of pressure to everybody, because it's not so easy to decide what to think about them, right?
That's one of the things that most appealed to me about the setup when I looked at it, because it's not easy to tell a World War II story that just has Germans in it, because you can't do anything which smacks of Nazi apology, obviously. But this was such a tangled situation because, as you said, these global citizens, some of the German diplomats were dyed-in-the-wool Nazis. They believed in it. They represented their country. That is up and down. However, many of them had only spent their childhoods in Germany, and since then had been in posts all over the world. And when they discovered what their country was doing, they are faced with this choice of representing what their country believed or not. And moreover, they're being sent back whether or not they agree with it, which meant that they were becoming German citizens returning to Germany at the end of this, regardless of how they felt about what their lives had been. Many of them were quite Americanized. There is one moment that was just stuck with me from the actual history, which is that one of the military attaches, his 16-year-old son had just been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he did an under-the-table deal with the State Department to make sure that his son would stay in the U.S. because he knew if his son went back with him, that he would have a very bad outcome in Germany. So I really liked the idea of being able to talk about what it was like to be German separate from that in this moment in a way that felt like a safer space to do it, particularly because those weren't the only Germans in these hotels at the time. These luxury hotels were very global areas as well before this. So even though they were located in the mountains, they would import their staff from other places, because if you wanted to be seen as a luxury hotel, you had a staff full of French and German speakers, which meant that there were Germans that had been in the US for a very long time, working for June. So it was such an interesting way to talk about these shades of meaning and what it meant to, like I said, to be looking at your country making decisions that you maybe did or didn't believe in. While June is also, as she's making her way up from absolutely nothing to the top of the stack, looking at privilege and seeing if she believes in what the Guilfoyles are doing. So it just felt
So
like
the Guilfoyles are the family who owns that hotel. Maybe we have to, to add that. And this is also something I wanted to ask you. The Guilfoyle, the father is dead, but he has 3 children left, Edgar, Stella, and Sandy. But it's not a question that one of them could run the hotel. It's very pretty clear that he had to pick June and support her from the very beginning to make her the manager, because his children were not what I don't know.
Not suitable, although, so he was unusual because it would have been unusual to be both an owner and a manager.
Yeah.
And so he came from it, but he fell in love with the hotel. And he drew it up from nothing, just like June, and made it this place where it was a playground for the rich, because he believes in the sanctity, the holiness of that mission of giving someone a good week. That to him is a very worthy goal. And so that is what he spent his life on. And when he discovers that June has a knack for it as well, it doesn't matter that she comes from nothing. She has a knack to listen and to hear what people are really saying. And that's required. And none of his children have acquired that same skill. So instead, it's got to be June or nothing, where the hotel, without her, the hotel really returns back to whence it came.
Yeah. So, but what was the most difficult part in running that hotel in the times of the war, when the rationing started? And I cannot even imagine what when you're used to that high standards, and then one day, I don't know, how did you do it?
Oh gosh, you touched upon a part that was so frustrating to research. Even the hotel archivist that I spoke to didn't know how much hotels were influenced by rationing. And so I got to finally dig in and see that, yes, they did have rules, separate rules. The biggest problem they had was actually rubber rationing. So tires were a huge problem, which meant that transportation was difficult. Staff had to carpool together. There were I love this image where one of the hoteliers is talking about how they are a wonderful modern hotel, and now there are horses and buggies coming up the road again because it's cheaper to come up with your horse and buggy full of staff.
In a time where the world normally goes in fast steps forward and everything develops so great, you go so kind of back in the 100 years before.
But there was a huge industrial issue as well, where any kind of thing that you can imagine would be working at scale in a hotel was also something that was probably being used in a tank or an airplane. So June has to grapple with her butter pat machine. I love this image of a butter pat machine. All it does is make thousands of pats of butter every single, because the scale of how many diners they have is enormous. And the butter pat machines could not be fixed during the war because they shared some part with some airplane. And I thought, I would have never thought about that. They had halfway.
But your standard is still no margarine, right?
Yes. They had to change their uniforms, rationing for clothing and hems changed halfway through. That was a big deal. And then, of course, there was rationing of food as well. But again, it was that double standard where the hotel got pinched a little bit, but the people who were really pinched were the people who were coming in to work every single day because they had no exemptions. They had rationing back home just like anybody else. So I knew going into this that this was going to be a bittersweet tale of how a certain slice of America lost its innocence, because it doesn't matter how good June is. By the end of the war, if you have a staff that was having a good time playing games and then they had to deal with that sort of inequality and be reminded of it every single day, there's no way the game feels the same at the end of it, no matter how protected she can possibly keep them from the war.
Yeah, that's really, really true. I think I have to talk about Hannelore. German, what do you say, Hannelore?
I like this American accent, Hannelore. It's like
Hannelore, you have a very... But accent is a thing also for June. You always, not always, but often it's mentioned that June has a very, very strong accent, which makes her also, before we talk about Hannelore, which makes her also not really part of the world she's working with, not with the guests, of course. Everybody would hear that she's not one of theirs, so to speak. So what was your thing with that accent?
I think that Germany has the same thing. Is it the Bavarian accent? Yes. So she
one of them.
So she has a West Virginia accent, and it's quite looked down upon. It's just associated with a lack of learning and being backwards. And so for her to open her mouth, the moment she speaks, they know that she's not of a certain class. So for her to have kept this accent is both her being loyal to her background, but also it's a barrier to ever getting any further. Once she leaves the hotel, she loses all of the status that she's acquired inside it. But she has a moment where she speaks with one of the Japanese diplomats, and the Japanese diplomats in real life were hated right before this had begun. Yeah. Of course, Pearl Harbor had been hotly debated by the Japanese diplomats, where they were supposedly arguing for peace, and this felt like a huge betrayal, where they didn't know if the diplomats who were in these hotels had been secretly working behind them, while the German diplomats were seen in a quite friendly way because, I mean, they hung out at parties all the time. This is the same social circle from before, so it was a very interesting situation. But she has a conversation with a Japanese diplomat, and the Japanese diplomat asks her if she is one of the Guilfoyle's wives because she can't hear her accent and she just behaves correctly. And I just love looking at, I don't know if it's true in Germany, but in the US, there's still so many different shades of what it means to be in society. We think about being upwardly mobile, but you can really, it's a branched tree, and there's some branches that you just can't work your way up into. And
we have that very relatively new discussion about class and working class, and the things change slowly, but maybe we have to work that more out also. So coming to Hannelore. Hannelore is, I don't know, 10 years old maybe?
Yes.
Hannelore Wolf, she's the daughter of a German diplomat and his wife, who are at the hotel at the moment, of course. And she's a very unusual person, and I loved her character. So how did you come to Hannelore?
I wanted someone who looked like Well, for starters, I didn't want it to feel, I wanted it to be someone's favorite book. Even though it's set in such a difficult time and it's set with so much hardship, it still feels very important to me that people want to live inside my books as well.
But June
And
is the person we want to stay with all the time. We want her to rule our lives and take responsibility for everything we cannot manage, no?
she always has a plan.
Yeah.
And I remember reading some of the records from children who were there, and they loved it because it was a paradise. At the Greenbrier Hotel and some of the other hotels, they had entire life-size doll houses for the children because children were so important at these hotels. You wouldn't want to come and have a wonderful time and feel like you're warehousing your children. And so the children had just horses and sports and all kinds of playthings and nannies and lessons. And so I wanted to offer a window into that. But I also really wanted to have someone who would be evidence of how June had gotten to be the way that she was. How do you become such a good listener? And I don't think that there's only one way, but definitely she was one of the ways to start. And she's a very bright and insightful girl who can see things about the hotel that other people don't notice because she's not saying anything.
No, she's not saying anything, but she's recognizing everything that happens. And it's very interesting how you painted her, because it's kind of, I saw her from the pages looking at me. It was really good. She's a very important side person, but next to June and Tucker, who are the main figures, I think there is a kind of choir of other persons, guests and staff who are really important on the second base for the story. So maybe you give us one more that you really, really like, and one more that was really, really difficult to write.
Oh gosh, I really liked writing Pennybacker. He's the State Department agent. He's
and
sort of a comic relief.
Such in trouble.
There were so many federal agents that were in these hotels, and they all left behind an interesting footprint to read about. And I remember I was talking to one of the historians, and he said, "Oh, please don't write about the FBI agents. They're so boring. Write about the State Department." And it was so interesting to look at the way that they had their own politics amongst them. So, for instance, at the FBI, which was supposed to be the hotshots, they started the war, and there were only 600 FBI agents in the entire country, which meant that Hoover ran it. 600, and by the end of the war, there were 11,000. So Tucker gets to see his beloved agency turning into something very different. And then Pennybacker is part of the State Department, and they're sort of seen as desk folks that are funny and not serious and not really effective by the FBI. And so watching these kind of mean girl politics being played out, I thought was quite good. But also, I really wanted June to have a friendly, sympathetic ear to talk to. And Pennybacker is exactly the kind of person who would have normally booked a stay at this hotel with his wife for a special occasion, which he is having wifely problems in there as well.
This is a really big problem. His wife is maybe his biggest problem in the story. So it's also a very great opportunity to show that it's. I always wondered, because of course it's an historic novel, and it's settled in that special time. But I always thought, boy, it reads itself so unhistoric. Do you know what I mean? It's so not present, because of course you did your research very well, and I learned a lot. But it feels like it's not a dusty thing on it. You know what I mean?
That pleases me so much, because although I have a huge love of history, and as a matter of fact, when I was reading my history documents, I would often have to sit at the dinner table and I would test my facts. I would say, guys, I read something interesting today about a pilot, and then I would tell them the story, and I would see if their faces slowly went blank with boredom. And then I would go, oh, not that one. Or I would be in the supermarket, and I'd be buying stuff, and I'd say, hey, here's a fun story that I just read about. And then if the light goes out of their eyes, you go, oh, that one doesn't go in the book.
Does it happen often?
It's true that a lot of history is dusty. I have a high tolerance for dusty, but I didn't want it to feel like history. Otherwise, the history is already fantastic. There's many books that are about this period that are it's very interesting if you want to read about history. But what I wanted something that felt like Amelie or Big Fish, where it would be something that takes place in history, but you feel quite immersed. It's almost a fantasy. It's a fairy tale. But then when you get into the Google, you say, oh, but all of the moving pieces are real. So you get to fully enjoy it.
That's it. So I disturbed you. We had Pennybacker, and who is the one who was so tricky to write?
Oh, it's so tricky to write. I think Honolulu's mother, I think, was the most difficult to write.
If you read it, you will know why. Just to the audience. Yeah, Honolulu's mother is very special, but she's very consistent in her kind of thinking and reacting and struggling, of course. So
yes, well, and she's a kind of person, a character who I think is very typical amongst the diplomats. I read about a woman who controls her outside very well, but that means that as we're trying to get at her as a reader, it takes so much time to chisel away and get real feeling. So always a difficult dance.
Absolutely. Maybe it was more easier. Do you have one of your 7 dogs is a dachshund?
No, actually, I do not.
So you have opened the book with we are waking up with June Porter Hudson, doing her daily business, doing her morning routine, and she has 3 dachshunds following her every step during the day. And after you read the book, you think you need to have minimum 1, better 3. So how came the dachshunds into the story?
I read a story that was from a hotelier in the 1930s, and he was working in New York City, and he was talking about all of the things that the guests left behind. Yeah. And one of the things that the guest left behind was he had a very rich guest who had a mistress, and she was tragically killed while they were having their affair together. And it turned out, this is true.
Sounds like the next novel.
If you're into history, there's plenty of dramatic stories.
Wow.
Yeah, so mistress was killed, and she had a dachshund. And so he ended up with a dachshund, and I thought, I'm going to use that. And I thought, but you know what? June is so good at her job that she could handle 3 dachshunds. She's going to have 3 dachshunds, yeah.
And what is really interesting when I think about it, they have no names. Normally, pets have always, and dogs especially, have always names, and sometimes very famous names and names with burdens and whatever, but they don't have names, right?
Yes, one of my favorite scenes, it's not a spoiler, Pennybacker asks her, how does she call them then if she doesn't have names for them? Because she says, well, the staff call them this. And he goes, well, how do you call them? And she just goes and says, I do this, and she clicks her fingers. And
she can do it.
I just like it as an expression of a name is a way of putting a label on someone. And I just love nicknames and last names and the way that we inflect names and how they change what you mean and need to someone. And what does it mean if you take away someone's name instead and they just become the dachshunds instead?
And it's very, very, very good. But talking about giving names, was it very difficult to find a name for the hotel and spa? Because I always thought it's really to give characters names and to give that kinds of buildings names. I can imagine people touristically go through West Virginia looking for your hotel.
I have so many lists. They went from the extremely realistic to the very specific and novelty, but I didn't want it to feel false. I wanted it to feel like a real place. And eventually my agent sent me a text, and I mean, we had exchanged hundreds of names, and he said, I dreamt it was called the Avalon. And I thought, coming to you in a dream, perfect, I will take it. Of course, I did discover when I announced this, that this is also the name of another hotel. A reader told me when I announced the book, they said, my husband tells me that there actually is an Avalon Hotel in West Virginia. And I thought, what? They said, yes, an Avalon spa, to be precise. And he said, you should look it up. And so I looked it up, and you guys can look it up as well. And then you will discover that the Avalon Spa in West Virginia is a nudist colony.
Okay, so we better don't. So maybe we better don't.
If you're at work, don't look it up there, but you should know there is an
Okay,
Avalon.
so this is not where you got your inspiration from. This is also maybe good to tell the story, to tell it otherwise, because otherwise people think they can see you there writing your next novel or something. I don't know. When I announced that talk, one of the first comments below was, "Oh, I know her from her young adult books." And I thought, yeah, this is an interesting thing, because in Germany there is a genre, always such a thing. You have your genre and you write this, and when you change for something else, it's kind of a what? There are a few people who write poetry and prose in whatever mixture, but was it a real decision for you? Have you thought about it like, I want to write for elderly readers now?
Yes, absolutely. It was a huge decision. Back in 2018, I was working on my young adult series, and I thought, I think my next book has to be an adult book. And it was because even though I could very easily publish in that young adult space for a long time, all of the books on my bedside stand were all general adult fiction, not just adult novels, but a very specific kind of adult novel. So I think there's a lot of adult genres that you can naturally move into with young adult, that a lot of young adult authors, when they get older, they move into fantasy or sci-fi or mystery, because those have a lot in common with young adult. But that wasn't what I wanted to move into. I wanted to move into just general literature. And so I took 2 years to step back, and I spent 1 year just reading 100 adult novels to look at them through that lens of thinking, what does it look like in that space for me? What do I need to change? And what do I like? And then I spent another year just practicing. What does it sound like to be me?
It sounds like such a hard work. How did you manage not to give up and do whatever bagpiping and drawing? And is it so hard like it sounds? Or
can I tell you, it was actually, so it was very difficult, but it was wonderful because it felt like, first of all, no one's making me do it. If I was backed into a corner and I had to do it because I was a failure in my genre and I needed to escape, I think it would have felt very different. But because I thought, I've lived in this space for 15 years and I've done what I intended to do. Because when I started out, I wanted to write novels that people would lose a summer to. As a teen, I read Diana Wynne Jones books, and that was my summer. And so I felt like I spent 15 years doing that. What do I want to do for the next 10 years of my career? So it felt like this gift. Who gets to start over from scratch at age 40? To be able to go and say, I'm going to be a student again. I'm going to assume that I know nothing, that I'm not good enough. And again, no one is telling you. If there was someone there saying, Maggie, you are not good enough to become an adult novelist, I'm sure it would feel differently. But because I thought there's all kinds of skills that I love as a reader about adult fiction that I don't have. And so it's my job to learn them. And I'm
really grateful that you did it. But I thought about it because the book for me I'm maybe in the third phase or whatever, is very much about, you have a job and you are very good at it. And everybody thinks, oh, she's doing exactly what she was born to do, whatever. And then to make a shift in which direction, whatever, and think about it completely new. This is also kind of a message I read in your novel, isn't it?
This is not an accident. I think it's very bad manners to accidentally write yourself into a novel. I think it's when we all start writing, we do it by accident. But then to be crafty about processing a part of your experience, to have that truthfulness into a novel is something different. And I was talking to, again, a hotelier, and he was saying, well, you should be June Hudson. I said, no, I don't want to be June Hudson. He goes, no, what you were just telling me. He said, about what you've been talking about, reinventing yourself. No one's asking you to do this. Everyone thinks that you're great at what you do. And so why are you doing this? Can you put some of that into there? So June is certainly not me.
And you don't wear Mary Janes, right?
I do not. I normally have giant Doc Martens and boots, and
it makes more sense with seven dogs. I had a question I wanted to ask you in the comments, because somebody's asking, did you have specific notes for your translators?
No, I did not in this case, but I will tell you, one of the translators in my life changed the way I wrote forever.
Really?
Yes, this was back when Shiver came out and it was translated all over. And I met up with my French translators and they said, we had a wonderful time. I had two of them. We had a wonderful time translating this, but we made you into a better writer. You're welcome. And I thought, excuse you.
Okay, take your baguette and go.
Said, look, maybe it's fine in the US, but in France, it would be considered very bad writing to use the same word twice on a page.
Twice on a page?
Why would you do that? That's, I mean, but why would you use the same word if it's a noun? Why would you use it twice on the same page? And so we would go through, and if we could, we would change that word so that French readers would think you were smarter.
So French translation is a new level, right? It's a very special level.
And I thought, what a interesting backhanded compliment. But what was amazing about that was that then I open up my next manuscript and I look at it and I think, oh, but they're not wrong. I could do better. Yeah. Because it is true that in English, if you went and said, the girl walked down the hall, and then at the end of the page you went and said, the hall was still dark, the girl walked through the doorway.
Yeah. And you think, okay.
Do you really think that those choices, do you need to remind us that it's the girl, or are you making bad structural choices in your life that do this? And so it is true that I have had many conversations with many translators from many languages over the year, and all of them have had interesting insight. So not with this specific translation, but coming.
I have heard a German translator from other languages into German in a talk, and he said there is no such a precise reading than translating. And of course you are busy with plotting and whatever, and they have the precise words and language. So props to Sabine Hübner, who translated it into German. And before we just finish, I just have a last question I wanted to ask you. And because I do not want to spoil too much, but I want to talk so deeply about the Sweetwater. So can we talk a little bit about it without giving up too much?
Yes, I think so. One of the things that was most challenging about figuring out where I belonged in the adult world was the level of magic. So I have always loved myth, and as a history major, my concentration was on medieval history. So much of the sources that you read are full of myth and magic, not in the sense of fantastic elf princes sweeping you away, but the idea that someone who is larger than life it's a different sort of medieval history. King Arthur. The idea that I'm now imagining this book with an elf prince whisking you away.
No, we stop that. We have to stop that immediately.
But I like the idea of having that same level of myth. That's very appealing to me. The idea of an otherworldly element, just amplifying something in it. So the Sweetwater, first of all, it already exists in real life. All of these hotels were spa hotels, which meant that they had springs underneath them. And so as I read about these springs, they all had their own local mythology as well. But I thought, how can I use the springs to underline what's already happening here? And so just a very light touch of the springs will give you back what you give to them. And it listens to everyone, but it listens to some people a little better. And so it listens to June very much. And that way the springs get to just be, if you're watching what the Sweetwater is doing, you have a sense of how well she's controlling her staff. Before anything else happens with the staff and the diplomats, you can, like June, keep an eye on that Sweetwater to see if it's turning, and then you'll know where you are in the game.
It's like a learning being. We always look in the nature and watch things in the landscape and whatever, and we think, hey, maybe the trees are listening or whatever. I have that sometimes when I'm out with the dog, very rare, but sometimes, and I think I'm not alone out here, and maybe you know what I mean. It's kind of, and the water that goes through every room in the hotel, fountains everywhere, and June, who's starting her day drinking 2 glasses of that water and ending every day with drinking 2 glasses again. So it's a very through the book flowing metaphor. But metaphors is such a good point, because it's it's also it's a very like magic realism situation, and it's far away from fantasy, so from too many unknown rules or whatever. But myth is it kind of a softer magic, kind of a...
Yes, I think myth feels true always. And don't get me wrong, I do I'll read and watch especially something that's a true fantasy, but I do prefer it when it's something true and it's just making it amplified. So the idea of the Sweetwater is, like you said, that innocent nature that's both wild. It can be tremendously damaging, but that's because it doesn't know any better. To me, that feels true.
And one last question from the audience. Somebody asked if you could do writing workshops, and I think you already do, right?
I did just finish a boot camp. I did 900 one-on-one Zoom calls from September through February with students. So I'm technically on a break now, but I love doing it. I love the idea of teaching people to write stories that I can't write. And so I'm sure that I will do it again, but yeah.
So we have a lot of opportunities to learn writing novels with you, and I'm looking forward to your next works. And I'm thankful for Sabine Hübner's great translation of the listeners' Grand Hotel Avalon. Just came out today at Fischer Publishing. And thank you so much, Maggie, for taking the time. So go and enjoy your tea and your dogs. Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.